Good to be with everybody this morning. Thank you so much for joining. And if you're watching this on the recording, I'm honored that you're giving me the time. As Lynn mentioned, my name is Beth Kloss, and I am the president and Big Fry here at Small Potatoes Communications. We're a creative communications agency based in St. Louis, Missouri, with clients that range from Fortune 100 clients and state governments to local businesses and nonprofits. Personally, I've been working in the communications space for 25 years. Writing, editing, and publishing communications, developing communication strategies, and generally helping companies celebrate their wins, weather crises, and navigate transitions of all kinds. Now I'm on a mission to transform the way the world communicates. And thanks to the past few years, that mission feels more critical than ever. Today, I'm excited to share more about our mission and how we use our core values of transparency, optimism, and limitless possibility to create communications that connect with employees, customers, investors, communities, and beyond. Along the way, I'll sprinkle in my tips for how we keep our values top of mind when tackling any type of project. And we'll also talk about the questions we ask when developing communications plans, so my Small Potatoes team and our clients can stay true to the mission. My goal with this isn't necessarily to enroll you in our mission, although we can use all the help we can get. My goal is to help you see how you can use your unique mission and core values as a foundation for the communications you develop. I was supposed to hit the button. All right, so easy enough, right? Onward. Before I get into this slide, and just a note of nota bene. One of my favorite things about webinars like this is the stories that people tell. So I've included lots of real life examples from Small Potatoes and the clients that we work with. But yeah, before we move on, sometimes it's helpful to look back. And this is a presentation that I gave in November 2020. This was the very first webinar I ever did. And you can see it's called When Nothing is Fine, Communication Strategies to Keep Employees Engaged and Informed During a Chronic Crisis. It included topics like why leaders need to take employee communication seriously and how to prepare employees to return to the office in November 2020, y'all. It even had a joke about toilet paper, which is so funny. And also, this is me. Wasn't I adorable? And look how young I look. Oh my gosh. Now it feels like nothing will ever be normal again. A significant percentage of office workers still work remotely at least one or more days a week. The service industry is struggling to find talent. The supply chain continues to affect businesses worldwide. War and political strife didn't magically go away during the last years of COVID. And we also have inflation and a struggling economy as the cherry on top. So whoever your audience is, chances are they are not okay. They're hungry for information, and yet doom scrolling has that moniker for a reason. And as communicators, we get a front row seat to the chaos. So how can we help? How do we make our messages stand out to audiences in the vast ocean of communications? Let's dive in. As I mentioned just a moment ago, I'm on a mission to transform the way the world communicates. And for Small Potatoes, that looks like developing communications rooted in transparency, optimism, and limitless possibility. And then deploying those communications effectively to help our clients bridge the gulf between themselves and their employees, customers, investors, and other key audiences. So how did I get here? Why transparency, optimism, and limitless possibility? As a proud Gen Xer, I grew up with a cynical view of the world. My worldview was influenced by Saturday Night Live, punk rock, and authors like Douglas Coupland and Ayn Rand. Ooh, cringe. Youth.
Is your presentation supposed to be showing?
No.
Oh, okay,
no.
Sorry.
Thank you all. You're just supposed to look at my lovely face now. I promise we'll get back to it. And once I began my career as a junior copywriter, I didn't see much that changed my attitude. My agency's clients were large automotive companies, tobacco giants, liquor brands, and my personal favorite, the Humane Society. Thanks for spotlighting me. Drafting ad copy for diesel trucks and sales brochures for cigarette displays was what I needed to do to pay my dues and improve as a writer, but it didn't exactly light me up inside. The commercials promoting pet adoption were pretty awesome, though, to be honest. I had no idea that you could train a cat. Pretty cool. So after a few years of working too many hours of overtime at the ad agency, I went to work for a large health insurance company, ready to learn all I could about corporate communications. And then my family relocated to St. Louis in 2020. I became a freelance writer for that same insurance company, and that's where I stayed for a long time, almost 20 years, in fact. Over those 20 years, I grew increasingly disillusioned about my purpose. Did anyone really need another internal newsletter? So many times I would work to get to the why behind what I was being asked to communicate. And most times the answer was, this is just the way we do it, or we're required to communicate this information 90 days in advance. That wasn't particularly inspiring and definitely not transparent. By this time, I had a very lucrative contract though, and a staff of 4 people. We were busier than ever and I just couldn't do it anymore. I decided that I had to do something else, something real with true transparency. And so I ended my contract in 2018 and started Small Potatoes Communications full-time. Looking back, I still can't believe I just walked away with no real plan other than we're going to help small businesses and nonprofits. I mean, bless her heart back there in 2018, but that's where I started from. Yet now what I see is I was hungry for optimism. What I could no longer deny was the limitless possibility that was out there, outside my comfort zone. You all know that kind of cliche expression, find what you love to do, what the world needs, and what you can make money doing. That people love to bring that up when you're trying to figure out what color your parachute is, right? Yeah, I didn't do that so much. I was clear on what I love to do and what the world needed, but the money part, not so much. And it's more important than you might think. After about 6 months of hustling to get clients in our desired demographic, so very small businesses and nonprofits, which is like a weirdly, extremely competitive market, and then getting them to invest in marketing with us at deeply discounted prices. After 6 months of that, my husband sat me down and said, we are using our savings to pay your staff. So I went back to the drawing board. How could we stay true to our mission and still make it financially? Or even better, thrive financially? It quickly became clear that the answer was to pivot back to serving large corporate clients. The corporate rate we would charge for our services would help subsidize the small potatoes rate that we charge the small businesses and nonprofits that wanted our help. And though I didn't want to just hold my nose and take on the same kinds of projects that I just left behind. Yes, we needed a steady income. However, I knew we had to commit to working only with clients who shared our dedication to transforming the way the world communicates. And we've never looked back. Doesn't that sound great? Of course we look back, like we failed. We made mistakes. We've signed contracts with clients who said they shared our commitment, but then actually they did not. And then of course, 2020 smacked us around just like everyone else. We pivoted and then we pivoted again, and I'm sure we'll pivot again soon. But what hasn't changed is our commitment to our mission and core values. Even if the client isn't quite there yet, we still show up, ready to do whatever we can to bring transparency, optimism, and limitless possibility to their communications. So how does that work? Whew, finally, we're here. Do the intro. So exciting. First, let's take a look at how we apply our core values to 3 common types of communications: crisis comms, change management, and then everyday promotional marketing communications. Because I think those are like the waters that most of us swim in as communicators, right? Let's start with crisis comms. So transparency is the key here. The question we ask is, what real and true? Forget about spin. Audiences see through the BS. Heck, some even manufacture their own BS about what we're saying. So your communications must be honest and forthright about what is actually happening. But then what about optimism? Can there be optimism in a crisis? I say yes, but not the Pollyanna, everything is awesome kind of thing that may come to mind when you think of optimism. Instead, we ask, what do we need to own and what did we learn? Here's an example. A small business client discovered that one of her employees had been posting racist comments on social media. And unfortunately, this came to her attention by a customer pointing it out on her business's Facebook page. So after taking swift action to fire the employee, the client reached out to me to draft a response to the situation, one that would include their unequivocal stand against racism, their commitment to their employees, customers, and community members of all races, and their plans to implement diversity, equity, and inclusion education and practices in their business. Times of crisis can also test our belief in limitless possibility. When the going gets tough, it can be hard to see beyond the next hour. However, as communicators, we can turn on that light at the end of the tunnel by paying attention to what's possible. To say, how will we use what happened to make things better for our organization and our stakeholders? And then start writing from there. Next up, change communications. It feels like we should already have gold medals in change comms after the past couple of years, doesn't it? After all of the ups and downs for employees and customers and investors and the whole world, it's been us communicators who have had to help everyone make sense of it all. Oftentimes when it 100% did not make sense to us. I want to take a moment here to say that I see you. I don't know everything you've had to deal with, and I know you've stayed with it. You're still here, and your commitment to your clients is worth acknowledging. Good work. Like most of you, I've had the opportunity to hone my skills with change communications a lot since 2020. And this opportunity has shown up in a lot of unexpected places. I want to tell you about one example of this that challenged my commitment to our core values of transparency, optimism, and limitless possibility. One of our largest clients contacted me in the summer of 2020 to bring me in to create employee comms for a massive organizational change that they were implementing in the fall. This would be effective approximately 6 months after the beginning of the pandemic, when they sent everybody home to work remotely. And unlike many businesses, this one was thriving with record profits and growth. Corporate employees had been working remotely successfully equally as much. And the kicker was that the changes that they were planning to implement seemed to fly in the face of the results the company was experiencing. Many employees would be required to move or lose their jobs. Before I even accepted the work, I had to get clear with myself. How would creating the employee communications for this initiative support our mission? And what I saw helped me renew my commitment to Small Potatoes' mission and our client. For transparency, I started with the question, what's the why behind this change? And from there, I held the company's executives accountable by creating honest communications for employees, including robust FAQs that addressed the truly hard questions employees could be expected and had every right to ask. Again, optimism can seem hard to find in situations like this. So I needed to ask, how will this change address the why? And finally, I brought in limitless possibility by asking, how will this change affect and possibly even improve the situation for the people impacted? The resulting communications carefully addressed how each phase of the initiative would impact employees, as well as what they could expect and when. I'll share one more for change comms. This one's a little less dramatic. A little over a year ago, the CEO of one of our clients announced that he wanted each of the company's more than 80,000 associates to be data literate. And since this company employs more than 80,000 associates, everything from white collar corporate people, sales people, healthcare providers, to hourly customer service representatives, the data education materials needed to work for each of these audiences. Now, I don't know about your level of expertise with data literacy, but for me, the topic is a little, shall we say, dry. So we started with transparency, the why behind the drive for data literacy. Let's face it, when it comes to change, there are no new initiatives. There's always a reason for the change. So share that reason with your audience. In this case, the why was the immense amount of data being delivered to and created by that company, including its security, the data's reliability, and the data's utility. Next, we brought in the optimism. We needed to communicate how the data literacy initiative would address the reason for the change. So instead of simply adding another required training to employees' to-do lists, we shared the impact of data for the company as a whole, for each department within the company, and for the individual customers they served. We helped them understand the urgency behind the CEO's announcement. And finally, we made sure the audience understood the limitless possibility of data literacy by communicating how increasing their understanding of data would directly impact the company, how it would impact the customers, and their individual work performance for the better. It's critical during times of change that our audience can see themselves in what's happening. By speaking to each individual's potential to help the company simply by learning more about data and how to steward it, we removed barriers around the topic, which many associates deemed as not relevant to their roles or over their heads, depending on their role's position in the company's hierarchy. Okay, enough with the doom and gloom and all that stuff with crisis and change comms. Let's talk about the fun stuff. Here's where we can cut loose and let it all hang out, right? Absolutely, as long as it's transparent, optimistic, and full of limitless possibility, which may not be as simple as it sounds. When it comes to marketing communications or any kind of communications that promote your company, transparency is still the gold standard. Again, we ask what's actually happening. Fun is definitely encouraged. Hyperbole is not, unless that's part of your brand and you have the legal budget to back it up, right? Red Bull. One example of this project is oh my gosh, I love this project so much. So my team and I are currently working on for a large state government agency. The goal of this project is to increase the number of small businesses hiring individuals with disabilities. And instead of leaning into the tropes in this space, the noble good, maybe tokenism, et cetera, they're using this data to do the talking for them. Sorry, I have a slide. Oh man. I have such a beautiful PowerPoint. I've totally skipped it all. Ooh, sorry. Here it is. They're using this data to do the talking for them. And as a small business owner, any one of the slide statistics on the advantages of hiring individuals with disabilities would catch my eye. All of them together, you have my undivided attention. Next up, comms that bring the optimism. These are my favorites, not just because I am an upbeat person, but because they encourage us to ask, how did the audience contribute to the organization's success? This past spring, we had the opportunity to plan a client's return to office celebration. Lynn knows this all too well. She was instrumental. After planning and then scrapping 2 previous return to office celebrations, we finally got to do it. We threw a day-long party in 2 locations that recognized every employee for their dedication and hard work. Each of their hard work resulted in the company's unprecedented success during the previous 2 years. We made sure the day was infused with optimism at all levels, with high-level acknowledgement from executives during a live in-person town hall, individual recognition from employees' direct managers, swag, everyone's favorite, and delicious food and drinks. And best of all, there was plenty of time for employees to just be together off the screen and feel like they were a part of something real. Finally, marketing communications thrive when we add in limitless possibility. We ask, what does this mean for the future of the organization and the audience? We encourage our clients to speak up and share their commitments. We know that oftentimes their audience will respond with support and accountability. One last story to share how one initiative can embody all 3 values. I did stop sharing, I know. One of our clients employs more than 140,000 hourly workers. In late 2019, the organization announced its commitment to hire 10,000 veterans over the next year. The communications got a lot of attention thanks to their transparency, optimism, and limitless possibility. The comms focused on the reality of the situation. Veterans often have a tough time finding employment after leaving the service, especially those who may be struggling with mental health issues or physical disabilities. Even more impressive is where the communication didn't go. They avoided leaning into the whole proud to be an American motif that can sometimes feel self-congratulatory in this space. In fact, everything from the CEO's outdoor press event to the internal communications celebrated the dedication and work ethic of the veteran community with respect, acknowledging them with optimism. And the initiative itself was all about limitless possibility. So the communications didn't shy away from the fact that the hiring commitment wasn't just a win for veterans. It was also a positive for the company who would benefit from this rich pool of talent for its numerous open positions. Now, I encourage each of you to think about your own mission and core values. How can you consistently bring these commitments to the communications you create? What questions can you ask for each of these common types of communication? As a reminder, for crisis comms, I'm going to go back to the screen. Go back. All right, for crisis comms, Small Potatoes Communications asks the following. For transparency, what is real and true? Optimism, what do we need to own and what did we learn? For limitless possibility, how will we use what happened to make things better for our organization and our stakeholders? For change management communications, it's important to know, for transparency, what is the why? Why are we doing this? There's no new initiatives under the sun. There's only a why for what we're doing now. For optimism, how will this change address the why? For limitless possibility, how will this change affect and hopefully even improve the people impacted? And for promotional marcoms, we ask, what's actually happening? And to keep the optimism, how did the audience contribute to the organization's success? And limitless possibility, what does this mean for the future of the organization and the audience? Thanks so much to Lynn and to the IABC Colorado for the invitation. And thanks to each of you for showing up and listening to what we're up to at Small Potatoes Communications. I'd love it if you had questions. Happy to take them now. Whew. And get a drink of water.
And for questions, you can either raise your hand or just unmute yourself to ask your questions, or you can type them into the comments, whichever you prefer. Okay, so we've got a question from Sydney. Have you ever encountered a client that wasn't aligned with your values to the point where it caused a rift? If so, what did you do?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that comes up a lot. And, you know, what we do in those situations is we still do what we do. Going back to the situation where the client was implementing the big restructure of their corporation right in the middle of COVID, we had to really step back and say, do we really want this opportunity? Because we could have said no. It probably would have really hurt our business with that client, but that was a choice. And if we did say yes, what would we bring to the table? And that's really where we had to, get really real on, okay, are you all willing, going back to the client to say, are you willing to answer the questions that employees are going to have? And they said yes, and then we would be working on the FAQs, and they're like, no, we don't need to say that. We don't need to answer that. We need to, nobody, and I would just stay firm and say, that's great if you don't want to answer the question in this FAQ, but that doesn't mean employees aren't going to ask, and they're going to ask their direct manager, and the direct manager is either going to have to make up a question or send them up the chain. So what do you want to have happen here? Would you like to just have an answer here for people to use and refer to, or would you like people to make it up? And then, other times we have had to fire clients in the past, or when we were in a pitch situation recently, trying to work with a new client, a potential new client on their materials, and it just wasn't a fit. And wow, that's really hard to walk away from potential business and say, it's not going to work. And instead of trying to force it, because, get away that what you do, what the world needs, and what you can make money at.
All right, we've got a question from Jana. Can you give examples of the change comms you created for the company that was restructuring and how employees evaluated the communication efforts?
Ooh, what a great question. So what we did was we made sure there was a robust internal communications strategy that, looking back on it now, may have even been overwhelming for employees. We had, all of the communications lived on their intranet site. So, and it was really, I don't want to get too in the weeds with this, but it was really rough because they had some employees that were just like flat out being let go. They were going to get severance. They had all their details. They had employees that were being invited to move to another location. And they had lots of, fun, rah, promotional, you want to do this. There's going to be relocation and it's going to be wonderful. And yes, it's COVID, but we're going to do all these things so you can be comfortable. And so it was like this real balance of really, sorry to see you go. They had people with very long tenure that were being let go. So that was really difficult, but that was something we had to kind of keep a handle on and realize that anything we were putting on the intranet site for the promotional, like, yeah, you're being invited to move audience, also had to be tempered with those who were not being invited to move and were giving severance and, still required to work though for a certain period of time to get that severance. And so it was just felt like a constant juggling act, working with the client, constantly being the voice of the employee for our client to say, oh, that's a rough one to, have a big, get together reception or cocktail hour or Zoom cocktail hour for people that are making the move, and then everybody else is, so it was just, and how it was evaluated by the employees. I I wish this client did more evaluation of their comms. It's something we're still working with them with to this day. And I will say that, we heard some kind of feedback that wasn't fantastic. Like, the chief people officer got, a talking to from somebody he ran into at Sam's Club. Like, it was not a great situation, but, knowing that then the chief people officer came back and told us about it, told us what this person's concern was, and we were able then to develop communications that, gave more information about Cobra was the situation of this particular employee. But was that helpful? It was rough.
Those types of changes are never happy all the time.
Right. I feel like we learned a lot, and it took place over a long period of time too, Jana. So it was kind of like watching a slow motion car crash. It was a rough one. And we just really had to stay in it with the client and be really, really nimble as far as developing new comms when as needed.
So I have a question, and it's kind of a two-parter. I love how Small Potatoes has such a defined set of core values and how you live up to that every day in the work that you do. What advice would you give to somebody who is trying to define their core values? Where do you start with that? And, how can they develop their own? And then the second part of the question is for somebody who's in a corporate setting and, they have their values. Sorry, my kitten is very happy to see you today. But how does somebody align their values with the values of their corporation?
Oh, great questions. I mean, I could be on here for another hour talking about how do you define your core values. Brene Brown has got great work in this place. Like, I'm a huge Brene Brown fan. Oh my gosh, Michelle, help me out. Like, her book on leadership, Dare to Lead, so good. Awesome about, defining your core values as a person, as an individual, as a leader. And then, for me at Small Potatoes, thanks, Michelle. For me at Small Potatoes, then it was like, those, and, I am an optimistic person. And I would say transparency, optimism, limitless possibility. Like, I mean, yeah, those are my core values, but like my personal core values are actually a little shifted from that. Like they're, a little, I don't know, I'm not going to go too much in detail of that, but like it really had to go like when I'm creating this business and whenever I'm creating like what I want to see in the world, basically, what do I think is necessary to transform the way the world communicates? It was really starting with my mission, starting with Small Potatoes' mission and saying, okay, that sounds really awesome. You want to transform the way the world communicates. What does that actually look like? And what is that going to take? And so that's where I arrived with the core values. It's going to take transparency, optimism, and limitless possibility, because while I love the idea of transparency and being real with people and telling the truth, like there also has to be that, the why and this is how it's going to impact you. And like, this is what we're learning and this is the way forward, instead of just like, oh, here's just the facts, man. I feel like that's what we get to do as communicators versus journalists. I went to school with a lot of journalists. They're still friends to this day. And I'm just like, I get to be a communicator. You have to tell just the facts. All right. Deanna says, which values do you think are most important to express to help? Oh, wait, sorry, Lynn, you had a second part. When your values, what do you do when your values maybe don't align, or how do you align your personal values with your corporate values?
How do you align your personal values? I think most people, when they're taking a job, feel somewhat aligned with the company that they're working for. Not all the time, but a lot of us do that. But just how do you make sure your values continue to align with what the company is doing?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, if you're working for a company that has very specifically defined values, like that's step one, right? And then, there are a lot of companies that have values and they're so big and broad. It's sort of like, okay, cool. That sounds good. I mean, but it really is like, as a communicator, being a voice for your company of the core values, of their values, especially if they're not walking the walk, if they say one thing that these are our values and they're not actually doing it, I feel like that's a part that we play as communicators to say, yeah, I can't tell the story of our values here with what's actually happening. And then, that's easy for me to say too, right? It's, that's a hard battle to fight sometimes. And then if my core values didn't align with the corporation I was working for, that would be rough. If I couldn't affect the values, I think it would be especially rough as a communicator. But, yeah, I don't have a super great answer there, Lynn. I'm sorry.
That's all right. It is a tough one. I think, for people who have a solid set of core values, it's easier for us to, affect that within the company. And
absolutely,
like you said, I think, going to them and saying this doesn't align, this, you say you have this value and it's not showing through this communication.
Exactly.
All right. And then Deanna's question, which values do you think are most important to express to help employees and other audiences feel okay, safe?
Transparency. Transparency, always. Just tell people what's real and true. Without spin, like those days of trying to like give your side of the story and, not acknowledge the full story, I just think are gone. There's so much awareness now of ESG and, the corporate social governance and all those things. Like you just can't kind of sweep things under the rug anymore. So that's what I would say. And that's why transparency is such a huge deal for us at Small Potatoes. Yeah, that's my answer. Thanks so much. Great questions, y'all. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, Beth. Just give one more chance if anybody has questions. We have a few minutes available. But we appreciate everybody for coming today. And Beth, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to the chapter. I'm going to drop your LinkedIn into the chat, and we'll include that with the recording as well. But if you want to connect with Beth, that's her LinkedIn profile. And learn more. You can learn more about her and Small Potatoes there. So
I think, did you want me to mention the other webinar we did back in June?
Yes, and
okay.
we'll link to that as well.
Cool. Yeah. So we did a really awesome webinar back, Sydney and Michelle, who's also on the call, that was focused on using investor relations as a way to improve employee engagement. And I know as communicators, like anytime we can repurpose communications and use things to do in multi-channels, like it's all there. So like we had to get 10 really awesome tips for that, and just in kind of a space that I'm not sure people think about a whole lot, is like bringing investor relations communications to employees. So I invite you all. It's on our website, or smallpotatoes.co. And I don't know if anybody has a website on Wix, but there was a big Wix outage this morning. And I was just like, oh, of course, today the webinar, people want to go to our website, but it's back now. So.
All right. Well, thank you again, Beth. Really appreciate you taking the time. For everybody who's attending, we will be sending out just a quick survey. We'd love your feedback on today's presentation, along with some thoughts on what else the chapter could provide. And also we've dropped the link to the Tables of 8 networking events in the link. And we'd love to have you sign up for those. So thanks everybody for coming, and have a great rest of your day.